The story begins in 1898 in a territory called Montana. At that time, Colton Brics was famous for his past as a legendary gunslinger, but his life was radically changed by the influence of his wife, Ruth. Now he's a man dedicated to his family. He runs a general store and a small farm while raising his 12-year-old daughter, Brooke. One morning, Ruth asks Colton to take their daughter to school because she has a lot of chores to do. At first, he refuses, stating that men don't accompany children on that route, but Ruth insists it's important that they spend more time together. He finally agrees reluctantly. On the way, Brooke suggests they ride on the horse, but Colton rejects it, saying there's no time for stops. When they get to school, they find out that the teacher is sick and classes are canceled. Colton tells Brooke to walk home alone, but she reminds him that her mother doesn't allow that, so he decides to take her with him to the store. There, Jeffries, a very talkative customer, comes in. Colton, trying to hide his annoyance, asks him what he wants. After a brief chat, Jeffries asks for flour. As Colton goes upstairs, Jeffries tries to steal jelly beans without noticing that Brooke is watching him. Ashamed, he puts them back and tells her to be quiet. When Jeffries leaves, Brooke tells Colton what happened, pointing out Jeffries' muddy hands. Meanwhile, at their home, Ruth is approached by 4 men led by James McAllister, who introduces himself politely and says they are lost. She sends them toward the nearest town, but their intentions soon turn dark. As they advance, Ruth flees toward the stable. The men chase her. Eustace gets worried, saying they should leave before the marshal arrives, but Boots calms him down. Suddenly, Ruth appears galloping on her horse, but James shoots the animal, making her fall before she is captured. Noticing a saddle with the name Colton Brics, James asks if Ruth is his wife, and Eustace recognizes the last name. Realizing they have unleashed a real demon, James, without showing any emotion, claims he owes Colton a debt. When Brics and Brooke return home, they find some strangers on the property. Marshal Franklin Jarrett approaches, surprised to see that Colton has a family. He informs him that Ruth was killed by the men after what happened. Brics digs Ruth's grave alone, refusing help from the group. Jarrett comforts Brooke, telling her that in the past he knew her father, whom he described as the coldest killer he ever saw, but he praises her mother for having turned him into a noble man. Brooke silently says that she has never seen her father use a gun and asks if he can still be a good person without her mother. Jarrett doesn't answer her. After burying Ruth, Colton returns and digs up the grave alone. The marshal warns him not to let Brooke see the mess in the stable. Brics asks for the names of the killers and what fate awaits him, but Jarrett refuses, saying that the world is better off without the old Colton Brics, reminding him that his daughter needs a father and promises that he will catch and hang the guilty party. When they leave, Brics enters the stable and finds a bloody handprint on Ruth's saddle. Following another stain, he discovers words scrawled on the wall in her own blood. "I owe you more." That night, Colton takes an old gun out of a box. Struggling with his feelings, he points it at his sleeping daughter, but she stirs and says, "Dad, Mom wouldn't like you pointing a gun at me." He lowers the gun and she goes back to sleep. Later, he wakes her up and asks her to get ready. Before they leave, he burns the house and the stable. The next day, as they ride, Brooke asks him why he destroyed everything. Colton responds that they can't go back, but that when he's done, he will build a new life and replace everything they lost in the fire. She silently says, "Except for Mom." Then, as they rest, he explains that they will eat and sleep for 30-minute periods every 4 hours. Brooke protests, saying that the killers will get farther away, but he explains that there's no point in arriving almost dead or without strength on the back of a horse. On the canyon trail, Marshal Jarrett wonders why Brooke doesn't show any emotion after losing her mother. His deputy, Mark, suggests that maybe she's in shock or doesn't understand the loss yet. Suddenly, James and his gang ambush them from the hills, mistakenly killing several men in the process. Believing that Colton is joining the gang, James orders his men to recognize him when they see him and then retreats. Elsewhere, Colton wakes Brooke up and tells her that he heard shots in the canyon 10 minutes ago. When she asks why he didn't wake her up earlier, he calmly responds that there's no rush and that they'll soon know what happened. Meanwhile, James hits Boots for shooting too early. His plan was to shoot the marshal first, but Boots' mistake allowed the officer to defend himself. Later, Colton detects a rider nearby and prepares to kill, looking for his horse. Brooke protests, saying that he could be a cop and that her mother wouldn't like him doing that. She asks if there's another option. Reluctantly, Colton agrees and tells her to distract the rider by crying. When she admits she doesn't know how, he harshly responds that she has to learn if she wants to survive in that world. Brooke forces herself to cry without emotion as the wounded deputy, Mark, approaches. Colton takes a gun from him, using Mark as a shield. They look for Marshal Jarrett and another wounded man, Greg. With the gun in hand, Brooke asks Greg to hand over his weapon, but he refuses, threatening to kill her. While he threatens her and Colton, Brooke steps on Greg's wounded leg, forcing him to drop the pistol, which she quickly takes. After freeing his friends, Marshal Jarrett acknowledges that he understands his pain, but warns that attacking a U.S. Marshal is a serious mistake. Colton tells him that Jarrett hid the killers' names from him. Jarrett tells him that if anything happens to his men, he will go after him and hang him. Seemingly torturing Mark, Colton forces Jarrett to reveal the truth. The killer is James McAllister, accompanied by 3 other men. It's rumored that James promised help with a safe if they managed to escape from the Powell County prison. Now they are traveling to Colorado in search of a girl in Santa Rosa. To teach Brooke, Colton treats Mark's bullet wound, extracting the bullet and cauterizing the wound with a hot iron, saying that the bullet was poisoning him. Brooke wrinkles her nose at the smell, comparing it to her mother's rabbit soup and saying that it makes her hungry. Then they get on their horses, but he insists that he's not a thief. He will leave the horses tied up in Santa Rosa. Meanwhile, James keeps his promise and his men unearth the safe, only to find it full of Mexican money. When they protest, James points his gun at them and says that if he wanted to deceive them, they would already be dead. He orders them to be silent for a year, assuring them that the loot is enough to live in luxury. When Boots asks about Brics, James responds that they won't look for him. Brics will come to them, and with a cold smile, he assures them that his plan is already in motion. Upon arriving in Santa Rosa, the gang settles in. Eustace is worried about the sheriff, but James says he already cut the telegraph line, ensuring they have 4 days before the news spreads. He orders his men to take turns on watch every 4 hours. That night, as Colton and Brooke rest, she asks him if he really changed after meeting her mother. Colton admits that he was always a cold and brave person, without many emotions. He didn't even cry at his own mother's funeral. But after meeting Ruth, something changed in him. Now he is afraid of losing her and of not being loved. For the first time, he really loved someone. Brooke silently confesses that she felt nothing when her mother died, only emptiness. Colton comforts her, saying that a part of him also ceased to exist and that the pain never goes away. When she asks him who killed Ruth, he admits that he doesn't know who James McAllister is. Then Brooke asks to learn how to handle a gun. Colton agrees, and the next day she practices with a rifle, although she doesn't hit the target once. Then she asks for a pistol. Outside of Santa Rosa, Colton watches the only entrance road, aware that James is watching him. He knows that one of his own will recognize him. Brooke suggests that it would be better for her to go in his place since they don't know her. Following his instructions, she gets on her horse and enters the city. She goes straight to the store, buys provisions, and asks if any riders have passed through recently. But as she leaves, James and his gang are waiting for her. Having recognized the saddle, they capture her and take her to the main saloon. James offers her food, which she rejects, and orders Boots and Eustace to prepare an ambush for Colton. James reveals his family's story. 20 years ago, his father, Walter McAllister, a famous bandit, tried to stop his brother's execution, and in that bloody confrontation, Walter was killed, leaving James, a child, as the only survivor along with Colton Brics, who simply got on his horse and left. While James talks to Brooke, he fills the safe with the newspapers, hiding the real fortune in some saddlebags. Outside, Big Mike sees Colton approaching and hides in a nearby building. The ambush comes, and Colton uses him as bait to stab him in the back. Then he kills Boots, but he gets shot in the leg by Eustace. James drags Brooke by the hand, pointing his gun at her while Eustace, frustrated at not having killed him yet, boasts that he just grazed him. He sends 2 other men to capture Colton, but he kills them without difficulty. He challenges James to resolve it his way, while Eustace keeps Brooke threatened with death. Wounded, Colton comes out of his hiding place. James asks him if he remembers him, but he says no. With an irritated expression, James tells him that he only has 2 options: kill him with the consequence that Brooke will also die or fend for himself. Colton chooses his destiny. He shoots Eustace, freeing Brooke, but at that moment, James shoots Colton in the chest. While James boasts of having killed the legendary Brics, Brooke shoots him with her father's pistol, wounding him in the chest and head with 2 bullets. In his last moments, Colton gives Brooke a locket with a photo of Ruth, whispering to her that her mother will always guide her. Brooke cries inconsolably as he dies. Then Marshal Jarrett arrives with his men to collect the bodies. An officer recovers the safe from the saloon, but James's saddlebags remain hidden somewhere. Jarrett agrees with Brooke that it's best to make everyone believe that Colton died as a hero shot down by the gang and keeps the criminals' money, without suspecting that the real fortune still lies in those bags. As they ride away, Brooke silently asks a woman to bring James's bags from inside, and when she sees them, she smiles.